Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to another session of Career Talk Thursdays. I'm Tamar and I will be your host for today. I would like to begin today's session with an acknowledgement of country. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place and by doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We acknowledge the elders, past and present, of all the land we work and live on and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I'm joining the call today from the Sydney CBD, which is the traditional land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. So, just to properly introduce myself, my name is Tamar and I'm a first year law graduate at Allens. I completed a clerkship at Allens in the summer between 2020 and 2021, and then I worked as a paralegal at Allens while I finished off my fifth year at uni. I then graduated at the end of last year, and in February this year, I started as a grad in the intellectual property team at Allens. So, this is the first session of the three-part Law Career Talk series hosted by Grad Australia. For those of you who are not yet familiar with Grad Australia, it is a graduate career site where you can explore and get to know graduate employers, get a backstage pass of what it is like working in a role in their organization, and apply for programs that are the best fit for you. You can visit gradaustralia.com.au to set up your account to get notified of open clerkship applications and other opportunities. Today's session is titled How to Plan Your Career Path in Private Legal Practice. So it will really focus on helping you prepare for a career in law, even if you are not sure which path you want to take. Our guest today will give valuable insights and guidance on where to start if you're thinking of pursuing your career in private legal practice. So our guest speaker for today is Natalie Mascarenas, and Natalie is a senior consultant at graduate resourcing at Baker McKenzie. So Natalie studied a double degree in law and science with a psychology major at Monash University in Victoria. She subsequently undertook her articles at Gaydon's in 2005. Natalie practiced as a lawyer from 2005 to 2011 as a commercial litigator, and she subsequently spent 6 months in-house at a bank. Natalie moved to Baker McKenzie in late 2011 in a new capacity in human resources. Her role has varied over the years, but has involved conducting the graduate and clerkship programs and recruitment processes, managing junior associates, managing global and national graduate projects, leading social media initiatives, managing L&D projects, and consulting to certain business units. She also plays a lead role on the firm's Baker Wellbeing Committee, which has a focus on mental health and well-being in the firm. So thank you, Natalie, for joining us today. Before we kick off, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, thanks, Tamar. That was a wonderful introduction. And yeah, very excited to be here today and showcase everything about private practice, and particularly keen to have the opportunity to answer your questions. You know, I know that a number of you are new to this, a number of you may be applying for clerkships this year. So very keen to make sure that you're supported with, the questions that you have to ask us. So we'll try to keep this part with the Q&A relatively brief, and we definitely want to have an opportunity at the end for questions too.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, please feel free to direct your questions to either Natalie or myself, and you can just put those questions in the comments, and I'll kind of keep an eye on the comments so that we can see how we're tracking. But I guess to start off, Natalie, maybe you could tell us a little bit about why should law graduates consider private practice?
Yeah, and it might be admittedly a bit biased in my opinion, having been someone who's practiced in private practice, but I do think it provides you with a really good basis for your legal career. I think in private practice, you get to undertake a range of different work in a variety of areas, and that enables you to build a range of different skills, gain different experiences. You'll undertake front-end work, which is sort of more transactional advisory sort of stuff, back-end work, sort of more litigious litigation, dispute resolution, mediation sort of stuff. So it gives you quite a broad exposure quite early in your career. And that also gives you exposure to different clients as well. So different types of clients as well. And all of these things lead to providing you with a solid foundation for your career. So just a couple of points, for consideration on private practice.
Cool, thank you. And I guess the next thing that I wanted to ask was your opinion on sole practitioner versus employment in one of these kind of bigger law firms.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Tamar. And it's an interesting one because there are pros and cons of both. I think working with a sole practitioner may give you more hands-on involvement. It would be a much smaller sort of practice or firm or team. So that might lend itself to more client involvement, more responsibility early in your career, developing fast in your career, developing, those skills, and having exposure to quite a variety of things, being in a smaller team. So you may be thrown in the deep end quite early. And an example comes to mind with one of my friends who worked with a sole practitioner, and she was in, first month or so of being an article clerk, as it was called back then, was sent to court, had to seek leave to appear before a magistrate, and the magistrate actually declined her leave to appear, which really threw her. So you get thrown, I think, some very interesting things quite early in your career, and some things that could be arguably a bit, scary or challenging. But it was a great experience for her and a good learning experience for her, to undertake as well. So I suppose the other thing with working with a sole practitioner, your matters might be smaller, may not be as substantial as they would be, say, at a law firm where you're working with a broader range of people. So I suppose employment at a law firm, you're likely to have an exposure to more people, a variety of people, and with that comes learning about people's different styles. Ways of doing things, ways of interacting with clients. And I think there's a real benefit to that because as a junior practitioner, you get to sort of understand how different people operate and sort of say, I'm going to take, that thing from that person and another thing from another person to help me be the practitioner I want to be. So I think, there are some benefits there. Um, I think, it's also important to keep in mind, and I can, talk from Baker's perspective, but many firms actually do give you hands-on work and involvement. So, you even though you're not working with a sole practitioner, you're working at a law firm, you still will have that opportunity to, undertake hands-on work, participate in matters, have interactions with clients, take real responsibility for certain tasks, build and develop those legal skills, and occasionally be thrown in the deep end. And Tamar, I'm sure you've, as a law grad, had that opportunity as well, since the time you've started. So, I think that even though that's something I noted as a benefit for working with a sole practitioner, it is something that most firms will give you as well. Um, I think I also the exposure to matters, I think, like having exposure to a variety of matters, larger matters, like working for a law firm, and that will also help develop different skills and experiences and broaden that foundation for yourself too. So definitely pros and cons with both. And I think it's really important to get a sense of who you are, what you want out of your career, how you want to develop when making those decisions between the two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of just one of the things you said, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's necessarily like one or the other in the sense that I'm now at Allen's, which is a big firm, but
Mm.
I'm also in a small team. So
Yep.
it kind of feels like, some of the teams are really large, like maybe the litigation team will be really
Yeah.
large and we'll have lots of lawyers, but the team that I'm in is quite small. And so it feels a bit more intimate as well. And it kind of has that
Yeah.
small firm feel, but within the context of this larger firm. So I guess
Yep.
the other thing also is with structured graduate programs or clerkship programs at bigger firms, there tends to be a really big focus on graduate learning and clerk learning. So they'll give you
Definitely.
tasks or things on purpose, like to help you learn. So maybe throw you in the deep end, but as a
Yeah.
learning experience. So yeah, I can
Yep.
definitely kind of see what you mean. I see the value of both of those.
Yep.
And I guess from your experience in private
Yeah.
practice, do you mind just maybe talking a bit about what roles and tasks a law grad in private practice can expect to be doing either in your firm or just across the major firms?
Yeah, and yeah, I'm happy to sort of talk about what I sort of see on a day-to-day basis with our, graduates and our seasonal clerks, and the kind of things that they get involved in are things like, drafting, a lot of drafting, sort of drafting correspondence, drafting court documents, research memoranda, and undertaking the research that goes into those as well. Things like drafting legal agreements or clauses for a particular agreement. So a lot of drafting. I think that's something that's quite common. Document review tasks. So it could be things like discovery, which you tend to do in a litigation-based team, or due diligence, which you tend to do in sort of like a commercial or advisory-based team. And that's really about reviewing documents that are relevant to a transaction or relevant to a litigious matter. And, you might be coding them, or you might be sort of allocating them to particular different categories and stuff. So that document review and attention to detail as well is really important in those sort of tasks. Things like attending court, mediations, arbitrations, client meetings, client conferences or telephone calls or Zooms these days, very common. Meetings with barristers or witnesses or experts, you might be attending those sort of things. Settlements, and even things like, I know at Bakers, graduates get involved with things like the business development side of things, so preparing client alerts or preparing a presentation that will go to a client or to an external party, or even internal presentations as well, like it might be on a new development or a new sort of a case that recently came out. So those sort of things as well, because I think we really strive to make sure that our juniors and our graduates become really well-rounded lawyers, because it's not just about the legal work. I think there's that business development aspect, there's the client aspect as well. So giving people opportunities on a variety of things. Also really important at Bakers is pro bono. So, and it's something that graduates and juniors and overall all firm is quite passionate about. And so we give our juniors or graduates the opportunity to undertake pro bono files and pro bono work. Many of them volunteer for various clinics or programs as well. That's something that many of them are passionate about too. And also get involved in firm life. So we have things like our inclusion and diversity committee. So things, they sort of focus around several areas like wellbeing. We have Baker Wellbeing. We have a women's committee called Baker Women. Baker Indigenous Engagement, which is around Indigenous engagement. Baker DNA, which is around cultural diversity. Baker Balance, which is around sort of flexibility and supporting parents and carers. And I'm missing one, Baker Pride, which is around LGBTQ plus diversity as well. So our graduates, juniors, but everyone in the firm can get involved in those committees and initiatives and really help drive the firm's strategy in relation to those inclusion and diversity initiatives. We have things like social committees as well. Lots of sporting events, so things like run club, netball teams, lots of fun runs. That seem to be quite a common thing for lawyers. They like running, but lots of sporting activities and stuff as well, and social activities for people to sort of get involved with and get involved with organising as well.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to say I'm not a big runner, so don't feel like dissuaded from joining the legal profession if you aren't a good runner like myself. But I kind of just wanted to draw on a couple of things that you said, because that was really interesting. Thank you for that. Well, firstly, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but across a lot of the firms, they'll have these committees. I know at Allen's we have some great committees that are kind of very similar. So we have like All In, which is kind of like our Pride network. And then we have a sports and wellbeing and, a reconciliation action plan committee. So there's really other ways to get involved in firm life and to do really cool things. And I think that's pretty uniform across a lot of the bigger firms in Sydney, especially. And the same thing kind of with business development. Like I kind of, before I came into this role, I really thought that it was going to be all like client legal work and all that kind of thing. But I found that I've been doing a lot of, general research on different things that are happening in the industry and then kind of sharing that information with the rest of the team or the firm. So kind of gives you autonomy over your work, which is really interesting. But one thing that you said was about drafting, and you mentioned a lot of things about drafting. Like, how would you kind of help a future grad or future clerk feel better about themselves, maybe if they haven't had much experience drafting, or perhaps they haven't had a legal job before and now they might be thrown into the deep end.
Embrace it. It's not easy. I still remember when I was doing a clerkship many moons ago, getting a piece of work back with a whole lot of red pen, and I was, type A perfectionist, high performer who always got really good grades at uni, and my work was always good, but it was a bit of a shock to the system that there were all these changes, but you don't know what you don't know. And I think it's a learning experience, and just try to remember, when someone is giving you feedback on your work, they want to get the best out of you. They want to see you succeed in your career, and they want to help coach and develop you. So think of it that way. It's a learning experience. But a couple of things that you can do, and we sort of provide lots of tips and resources and stuff, and I'm sure Alan's doing the same, Tamar, but ask for, a sample or a precedent, so you sort of know, the person's writing style or what they kind of expect, say in a research memorandum. You sort of know how to set things out. Like, that can be quite helpful. So you sort of know there's an executive summary up front, and then the research that follows that. So I think maybe knowing the structure is quite helpful. Even just ascertaining the format. So does the person giving you the instructions, do they want you to come back in an email? Do they want you to come back in a memo? Do they just want you to come back with the research, like, verbally? I think that can be quite a useful thing to sort of understand as well. And then I think once you sort of also sort of understand, how long should I spend on this task? Like, that's another sort of important question that you can ask, that can kind of feed into the actual work the work output as well. I think the other thing, though, is, prepare the work, check and recheck. Like, I'm such a stickler for attention to detail, and anyone who knows me knows that that's something that's very important to me, as an ex-lawyer, and even in this role. So, just making sure you check and recheck your work. And the same goes for cover letters, CVs and stuff. Print them out. You pick up a lot more in terms of errors or grammatical mistakes if you read it in print format, rather than on your screen. So just keep that tip in mind. Print it out, even get your buddy or someone else on the team to have a quick look at it and before you hand it in. So something else to bear in mind as well. And then if you don't get feedback, or if you don't see the markups, ask for the final product. So you can do a bit of a self-comparison to sort of say, okay, here's what I produced, here's what finally went out. How can I learn from that? What can I do to improve? And then, speak to the person who gave you the task to get an understanding of, why they made the changes and stuff as well. So just, I think, a couple of things that come to mind.
Yeah, well, I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of what my experience was, which is just communication is key.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no one's going to be angry at you if you say, I've never written this before. It's really great to just be able to say, like, look, I've never done this before. Can I see an example? Can you give me some specific guidance? And, people are generally pretty happy to help. So,
Of course.
yeah, I learned, I guess, not to be intimidated too much by that.
Wonderful.
Oh, we actually have a question from Joanne.
Great. Yep.
So Joanne says, I had one quick question. Do you have any tips for when you are not given enough information for completing a task, how to go about asking for more clarification?
Yeah, so one of my tips, there's something which I call the toe in the door policy. So when you're getting your instructions, ask if you can come back to check in with them, like later in the day, or, with a follow-up email or something like that. So that gives you an in to come back to the person to request further information. The other thing you can ask, is there say a partner's giving you instructions, is there a senior associate or a lawyer that I could go to, who might be able to assist with this task, and they might be able to they might know the background, the context, the research task, and they might be able to give you tips and advice. But I think it's as simple as, if you need more information and clarification on things, then it's important to seek that. You don't want to be going too far down a task and having done too much, and then sort of learning that you've gone down the wrong path, or you haven't understood things properly. So it's really important to get that right as soon as possible. And that sort of comes back to that taking instructions piece and getting the most out of that instructions piece, and the most as much as you can in terms of the information about the task from the outset. But understandably, people forget things. They may not include the complete instructions. Things may come up through your research that you've sort of uncovered, or reviewing documents that you've uncovered that you might want to explore more. So I think it's as simple as, asking if you can come back to that person or to someone else, and then, just asking those questions. One thing that I think can be really useful is not going back with questions like on an hourly basis, but maybe collating a few questions. Like really thinking through the task is important, and sort of saying, okay, I don't understand who the trustee is of this company here. So that's question one. I need to kind of understand that. This party was not mentioned to me. Party X was not mentioned to me in the instructions. So I'd probably need to know about that. And I forgot to ask when the deadline is. So I could probably go back on those three things. And then going back with a collection of things, I think can be quite useful. And it's also just, that makes, you want to make your work provider's life as easy as possible, and, show that you're considered and you're thoughtful in the way you approach tasks. So, I think collate a few questions and go back on that basis.
Yeah,
Tamar, did you have
thank
anything
you.
to add as someone who's, in the weeds doing this sort of work at the moment? What comes to mind for you?
Well, I think that actually now that we're all kind of back in the office, it's a lot easier to just turn around to someone next to me because, my
Yes.
team kind of all sits together, turn around and be like, wait, sorry, so when did you want this completed
Yeah.
by? But yeah, I have found it really useful to kind of come back every hour, a couple hours. It really depends on like if the deadline is that day or if it's in a week's time. Like, you kind of just, have to use your discretion as to,
Yeah.
is it, if it's the deadline's in 2 hours, then maybe it's okay for me to ask a question every half hour because this is something urgent that needs to get out
Yes.
and we don't have time for mistakes or guessing. But if it's kind of
Yeah.
maybe a long-term project that you've got a whole month to prepare, let's say a presentation on, you might just say, okay, I'll check in with you on Wednesday and kind of show you my progress. So it kind of, you just have to use your discretion, I guess,
That's right.
with each task. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
cool. And then my next question for you is about kind of career progression. So if you could just talk a little bit about what maybe career progression at Baker McKenzie looks like, or kind of just more broadly if you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, sure. So it's easiest for me to talk about it from Baker McKenzie's perspective. And we have what we call a development framework, and that sets out what a successful lawyer looks like at each stage of their careers. So the framework has sort of key sort of performance areas and personal qualities that make a high performing lawyer. And basically, we interviewed clients and people in the firm to sort of understand what those key things were, and we put together this framework. And it is a global framework, so Baker McKenzie is a global law firm, and the framework applies to all of our global offices, which is really valuable, I think, as we send a lot of our lawyers on overseas placements to our offices in other countries. And so if you were doing a placement there for 1 to 2 years, 3 years, it's really useful to be subject to the same framework, and really valuable that you can be promoted. You're not sort of taking a step backwards in your career, but you can actually be promoted while you're working in one of those overseas offices. So the framework is it sets out the key things that makes a successful lawyer, and it's a successful Baker McKenzie lawyer. But it also sort of sets out what those specific, the specific qualities and the specific things, the experiences and the I suppose, the milestones you need to be hitting at each level. So as a junior lawyer, like a graduate or a junior associate, these are the key things you need to be achieving in terms of your, legal and technical knowledge, or your, client service, or the way you handle your work product and your work. So it'll set that out for a junior associate, for a general associate, for a senior associate, for, a partner. And the same thing goes for professional business services, which is sort of my areas, so HR and or talent management, or finance, or marketing team. So we have our own framework. But for the legal staff, there is that framework. And what I think is really great about that is that it's very transparent. You know exactly how you need to be performing at each stage of your career. But it also gives you the opportunity to understand how you need to be performing to get to the next stage. So if you want to get promoted from, say, general associate to senior associate, it's very transparent and clear about what kind of things you need to be doing, how you need to be performing in each of our sort of key areas, and same goes from senior associate to partner, etc. The development framework feeds into all of our development programs. So we have a junior lawyer development program, a general associate development program, senior lawyer program, etc., partner program. And so the key skills and stuff that we expect of our people, that feeds into the sessions and the development that we run for people at each of those stages as well. What else can I say about the development framework? It forms part of our performance review process. So as a graduate, we do end of rotation catch-up, we do mid-rotation catch-ups, and just to make sure our graduates are tracking okay with their rotations, what kind of work they've been doing, how they can get the most out of their graduate rotation, anything they should get involved in to make the most out of their rotation, and then an end of rotation catch up. And that's where we sort of collate feedback and give really structured feedback on those key aspects of the development framework. So from the commencement of your career, you're getting, you understand, what makes a high performer, and you're getting that feedback on the key areas that makes a high performer. So that happens during each of the graduate rotations, and our graduates undertake 3 rotations. And then it happens on an annual basis as part of our broader performance review process. But yeah, it's really, really fantastic, very transparent. As I said, even if you go overseas, you still have that opportunity to get promoted if you're overseas, because we're all subject to that same global development framework. So I think that's definitely a key thing that sort of stands out about, the path of promotion and how to progress and stuff at our firm.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think that, like, especially hearing you talk about the kind of development programs and the performance reviews and stuff, like, I think I was really intimidated by that in the beginning, but then I realized that's something which is probably a feature of most law students, is that they like regimented, like clear structures and frameworks. So it's
Yeah.
actually something really great to, help you set goals for, or to, look and see what kind of things you need to be achieving to get to that next level, and then you can kind of set like a clear pathway for yourself to get there. So I kind of like that support network that it almost gives you. But yeah, something you mentioned about going overseas was really interesting. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about that more. I'm not sure if Baker McKenzie kind of does secondments to other companies, aside from overseas, but I think that would be something really interesting to hear about too.
Yeah, definitely. And look, Tamar and everyone, things have been on pause over the last few years with the pandemic and travel restrictions and everything. But we were able to send one of our lawyers overseas to London mid-pandemic because it was just her dream and something she really wanted to do, and was sort of on a bit of a time schedule. So she went across mid last year to London, and joined the firm sort of in a lockdown way. So she was working from her apartment, but still sitting part of the London office. So we did sort of accommodate that, but generally, they do happen quite frequently. We send people across, so to a range of our offices. We have programs that you can go like overseas for a short-term stint, say 3 to 6 months. Not as important to, I suppose, understand and be able to converse in the local language, with those sort of things. But if you're going over for 1 to 2 years, it is beneficial to understand and be able to speak the local language. I mean, business is conducted in English across our globe, but things like PD sessions or some of the client sessions, they might be in the local language. So it does sort of help to know the language. So, but having said that, we find that a lot of our people tend to go overseas to London or to the US. So we've had people go to New York, Chicago, LA in the last sort of couple of years, and London is also a really common one too, but also to APAC. Singapore is a very common one, Hong Kong, I'm trying to think, with the longer term sort of programs, they sort of tend to be the main sort of Tokyo, the main sort of cities that people go to. So we have the opportunity for you to go probably a couple of years in, because when you go overseas, you'll be seen as the expert in Australian law. You want to have a bit of a foundation before you go overseas. So for the longer term stints, we recommend getting a couple of years under your belt before you do those sort of programs. But we also have a range of shorter term programs. We have a 1 month placement program where we've placed ex-clerks and incoming graduates in another overseas office for 1 month, and was called an international clerkship. So we have that program as well, which is probably more relevant to your year level. But in terms of the longer programs, as I said, with our overseas offices. But I think the other really great thing is we have lots of global training programs. So they can be practice group specific. So, if you settle in the corporate M&A sort of team or mergers and acquisitions type team, you can be sent to, say, one of our other offices. And I think the most recent one pre-COVID was in Bangkok, and have, global training with everyone who's with all the associates who are in your practice area across the APAC region. So there's practice-specific global training, and there are also milestone career programs. So when you transition, say from a junior associate or graduate to a general associate, we typically have sent our general associates to APAC to undertake a training program that is designed to give them the skills and train them up on the key things that they will need at that particular career stage, so as a general associate. And the same thing happens when you become a new senior associate. We send our APAC lawyers together to come together in one of our APAC offices for a training program, and same senior associate to a new partner. There's another training program, and that happens in our North America region, in our EMEA, so Europe, Middle East region as well. The associates from each of those regions come together for these training programs. Summer school programs, so one of our associates will be heading to the US for a US summer school scholarship program later this year. So we have things like that. And we even do things like support people to do their masters in an overseas jurisdiction as well, and connect them with the local office. And likewise, we've had a number of people, so I'm based in Melbourne, who have come to do their masters at Melbourne University. It seems to be a lot of people from South American offices have come to do that, and they've been connected to our office. And they're not working as such, but they have a connection with our office. We invite them to events, invite them in for coffees and catch ups. So they have, just a bit of that support while they're undertaking their study and masters full time.
Great, thank you. I think especially coming out of the last 2 years,
Yes.
having a pandemic, and I guess my last 2 years of uni, when I imagined that I would go on exchange or go traveling and do all these things, I wasn't able to do it. So I guess that would probably be something really appealing for people, kind of graduating around now or in the next year or so, where they may have missed out on some opportunities to travel overseas or work overseas or study overseas. So I think that's something really great and really appealing that I know a lot of firms offer. So thanks for that. We have some more questions from the audience.
Sure, great.
So, okay, here's one. Are there any advice for mature age law students who had prior work experience in the non-legal industry, i.e. 10 years plus in business consulting? And then a kind of secondary question, and how should we go about entering the legal industry after graduation? Thanks.
Yeah, really good
Maybe
question.
Let's the first one first. Yeah,
it's a great question. Look, no specific experience, but as I would say to anyone applying, play to your strengths. If you've got this, business consulting background, you will have, commercial awareness, commerciality, contacts in the industry potentially, or just, a range of professional contacts. So play to those strengths in your application. We have taken people who've had prior careers. So I can think of off the top of my head, like we've had someone who's had a career in banking, someone who's had a career in consulting, someone who's had a career in engineering, science. So we have taken people with previous careers and stuff. Like, that's not an issue at all. I don't think it'd be an issue for any law firm, really. It's, I think, only seen as something that's quite valuable. But in your application, you would play to your strengths. Typically, those people have come through the door via a clerkship. So whether that's Sydney or Melbourne or wherever the offices are based, like we have offices in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, so tend to refer to those. But people have applied through the clerkship process, regardless of their industry experience and stuff. So I I wouldn't sort of say anything specific. Don't let it deter you. I think it's a great thing, but just play to your strengths in your cover letter. We can go on about this, but cover letters so important to personalize and to tailor your cover letters, and to sort of play to your strengths and how you can add value to the firm and what specifically interests you about the firm. That is key. That's a really key part of personalizing and tailoring your application and cover letter. So that would be my key tips. And your other question, which was how you should go about entering the legal industry after graduation. So if you haven't applied for a clerkship, or you don't intend to, or you haven't been successful in getting a clerkship, you can look for market graduate offers, and firms offer these from time to time. Talking mainly sort of private practice, many firms tend to be signatories to the relevant guidelines. So the Law Institute of Victoria guidelines or the Law Society guidelines, so they tend to follow those in terms of the clerkship and graduate recruitment processes and stuff. So if you are looking to enter after graduation, then it's just a matter of maybe sort of seeing which firms are open for market graduate roles. I will say with Bakers, we don't tend to go to market. We tend to recruit the bulk of if not all of our graduates from our seasonal clerkship pools. And I know many law firms are the same, but sometimes firms may want a bit of top up in terms of their graduates and stuff. They might want to seek a couple of extra graduates as well. So but I think the clerkship process is probably a good foot in the door. But there are, as I said, firms like top, so large or mid-tier, who do ask for sort of top-up grads and who will go to market. A lot of small firms will go to market as well. That's something that we quite commonly see. Government as well. So keep that in mind too. And accounting firms, like you can also go through the accounting firm route as well.
Yeah, I think I know quite a lot of people at Allens who had entire careers in different fields, whether that be science or fashion or anything like that. People who are at a similar level to me or kind of started it and might be 5 to 8 years older than me with an entire other career under their belts. And I think that's really seen as like a value add rather than something that's maybe a detriment, because it's so much just more general life experience and experience in the workforce and experience working in teams. And I think it's seen as something really valuable. So I wouldn't be worried about that. I mean, obviously I'm not an HR consultant or anything like that, but I've been through the process and I've met a lot of people, and I've kind of seen that it's really seen as something positive. And the same thing with like the clerkships. I applied for 11 firms during the clerkship process. I had a lot of friends who applied to a similar amount. I had some friends who got 10 interviews. I got 4 interviews and 7 straight up rejections without even an interview. So, it's really not necessarily a marker of if you're going to be successful or not. I have friends who were not successful at all in the clerkship process and now have great grad jobs. So it's definitely a really good way to get your foot in the door. And if anything, just practicing for applying for jobs. Like, I thought that was really useful. But yeah, I think that, I know Allens has put out also like some external grad, has opened the applications externally as well, in addition to their clerkship. So some firms do it from time to time. I don't think they do it very often, but I think clerkships are usually a good way to go. And we have another question from Joanne. So how much would you say the firm emphasizes these training programs, and how accessible is this for more junior lawyers?
Yes, we certainly emphasize it a lot. We tell the partners and supervisors that it's compulsory part of development, and important that graduates attend. So we send out communications like that, and it is so for us, there's like on a monthly basis, there is a session on a key area of law or practice. So, I mentioned discovery or due diligence, or commercial drafting. So there is always, like, at least on a monthly basis, if not more, there are these sessions on. We also have intensive programs. So most recently, we sent Melbourne grads to our Sydney office, and we ran a graduate intensive program nationally for all of our graduates in person, which was so lovely. And that was on commercial practice and litigation practice. So the key things, not so much the sort of stuff you study at uni, but the key practical things that you need to do or know about in commercial practice or in litigious practice. So we ran those specific intensives. We'll run them twice a year to make sure graduates are attending those. So there is a strong emphasis on development for junior lawyers, and there is a people see the importance of it and the value of it as well. So definitely firm definitely emphasizes the training programs, and takes them serious for their junior lawyers.
Yeah, I think that my experience has been pretty similar. Like, compulsory training. I have at least one session a week, whether that be kind of firm-wide or grad cohort-wide training, or like kind of team specific. So I know that a lot of the teams at Allen's have like junior training programs. So because you might, end up in the banking and finance team and you have no idea about banking and finance, or some of those things are like in the intellectual property team, for example, you might never have studied that at university, and they're really important concepts and things you need to know.
Yeah.
Or training programs, kind of like how to file documents at a court, or
Yes.
things like that,
Yep.
like that you don't necessarily learn at uni. So I found
Yeah.
that like having these regimented programs has been really useful to kind of build on that more like abstract, black and white theoretical
Yeah.
side that we learnt at university.
Definitely. And we also offer things like a number of soft skill sessions. So, being a lawyer, like, little did I know many years ago, but starting practice, it's not just about knowing the law and, understanding the legal commercial side of things, but there's so much more. As I mentioned earlier, there's that business development side of things, the client side of things, but there are also some key skills and qualities that make a good junior lawyer. So, learning about, your personal brand, communication, like all of those sort of soft skills soft skills sort of things that you need, leadership, resilience, all of those sort of things. We run a lot of, I call them soft skills. Simon Sinek would call them human skills, which I do like a lot better. But running sessions on those sort of things to help you become a really well-rounded lawyer and, a really well-rounded professional, I would say generally.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. It's kind of drawing on that. Something that I was really concerned about when I was applying for clerkships was people
Yeah.
talking about, commerciality a lot, and I was coming in with a communications degree and law, and I kind
Yes.
of was like, oh, I don't have an economics or business background. Like, how am I
Yes.
going to be able to fit into this commercial setting? Could you maybe talk to that a little bit?
Such a good question, and a question I get asked quite frequently. So thank you for asking that. You don't need to have a commercial or commerce or business background to be a successful commercial lawyer. People, if I look at our grad group, it's very varied. Arts, science, business, commerce, performing arts, like very varied in people's other degrees. So a lot of the stuff you'll sort of just learn on the job. But I think being a good commercial lawyer, it's about, thinking practically, understanding your client's business, being curious, asking questions. All of those sort of things will hold you in good stead for being a good commercial lawyer, but don't feel like you need to have, that commercial background. You get a lot of guidance and support at, all firms, in terms of, with giving you in terms of given instructions, given guidance, mentoring. So you'll be guided on the way, you'll be given feedback on the way, and you just learn on the job as well. So don't feel like you need to have a specific background. as we mentioned earlier, like we run a lot of sessions to sort of support juniors with commercial drafting. You learn a lot on the job. You can do things for yourself, like, even just doing things like reading the, AFR and stuff can really sort of help you get an understanding of what's happening in the commercial world. But a lot of those things you'll develop along the way. I was going to mention this, we are running what we call the Baker's Dozen series again this year, and it's a series of bit of a play on word because Baker McKenzie is commonly known as Baker's. It's a series of 13 sessions run virtually on a whole lot of different aspects about firm life. So, I've mentioned inclusion and diversity, pro bono, so there are sessions specific to those. Also on the recruitment process, so things like cover, like your application, so cover letters and CVs, interviews, networking events. But there is actually a specific session on what is commercial law, how you can display commerciality. So we're running that in a couple of weeks' time. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, feel free to do that. And I will be posting all of our sessions on LinkedIn today, our full series, but I'm also posting them on Grad Australia. So you can access through the Prosper Grad Australia website all of the sessions, the 13 sessions we're running. But there is one there specifically on commerciality and understanding commercial law. And we have a special guest who's joining us from our London office, Harry Clark. And he provides resources and podcasts for aspiring lawyers and helping them sort of navigate these sort of things. So he's done a lot of work on what is commercial law and displaying commerciality, and he's joining us as a special guest from London for this session.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think that before kind of clerkship season started, when I was still at uni, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to do a clerkship or go down this kind of commercial path. But I found that going to all these different sessions that the firms were running, like I went to a lot of the Baker's Dozen sessions, and I went to a lot of different sessions provided by different firms, and also things like Grad Australia and other platforms like that. I found that really useful, just to kind of give me a better idea of what to expect from real people who had experienced it, or the people who were going to be reading your CVs and your cover letters. So it was good to hear from those perspectives. And I guess
such good advice, though. And I think even just coming here today, like for those who've joined this call, you're learning something, you're building your networks. I think try to get along to keep a bit of a balance. Like I know it's a stressful time, but I think it is valuable to get along to as many of these things as possible, so you can set yourself up for success, and also just build your networks and contacts and stuff. So really good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of even just like following people on LinkedIn or connecting with people on LinkedIn. Like I've had people over the last couple of years, just they see that I'm working at Allen's and they sent me through a message like, what kind of things should I be including in my cover letter? And I don't have time to give full in-depth tutoring sessions to everyone, but I'm always happy to answer questions, and I know that a lot of other people feel the same way. So it's definitely a good idea to reach out and try and build your network through LinkedIn, or I guess now that people are back in the cities and stuff, to meet up with people, go for a coffee and a chat. It's definitely, it can never hurt to reach out, I think. Yeah. And then I guess one more thing that I wanted to ask is, when you're getting all of these, I guess you'll probably be able to answer this better than I will, but when you're getting all of these applications, we hear about every year how many hundreds or thousands of people are applying for clerkships. Like, how does one person make themselves stand out, or distinguish themselves from every other person who's also got good grades and that kind of thing?
It's tricky. It's a really hard thing to give advice on. And I think a couple of things that I suppose stand out to me are the importance of being yourself and showcasing yourself, because firms, all of us, all firms want someone who's, unique and individual, and that will add something beautiful to the fabric of the firm. So I think very important through the application process, interview process, networking coffees, whatever you may be doing, be yourself. I think that's really important. And I think the other thing, and I said this before, is to tailor your cover letter. So important to show that you are genuinely interested in the firm that you're applying for. So don't prepare what I call the find and replace cover letter. So if you read the same, so if I say I would like to apply for a large global law firm that I would like to apply for Baker McKenzie because it's a large global law firm that has outstanding work and clients, outstanding training opportunities and global opportunities. That could apply to a range of firms, but who have you spoken to throughout the process? What did they say? How did that draw you to the firm? What did you learn about the firm through a clerkship guide or through Grad Australia career story, graduate stories, or day in the life articles that drew you to the firm, and how will that contribute to your career? So really important to think about what you've learned about the firm and link that to, you know, why you want to join the firm. Like, personalize it. It's fine to put people's names in. I wouldn't just name drop for the sake of name dropping and sort of saying I met XYZ at this event, that's why I want to join the firm. But, you know, did Tamar say something about the graduate program that caught your attention? Did I say something about the development framework that caught your attention? How is that going to contribute to your career? How are you going to add value to the firm? So just think about those things in terms of personalizing your cover letters. And I'm happy to talk a lot more about this during our Baker's Dozen series. It comes up a lot, but I think personalizing is really important. Making sure you answer anything that firms ask you to answer in the cover letter, like they ask you to address XYZ, do that. Make sure you address those things. Answer any sort of short answer questions really well. I think that's really important. But yeah, I think they're the key kind of things I would sort of say.
Yeah. I think that like that was the main kind of advice that I also got when I was attending all the different kind of clerkship sessions. And the one thing that people said was, careful what you say in your cover letter, because someone might very well ask you about it in your interview. So if you've gone and said, oh, well, my friend Tamar has said this and that's why I want to work at Allen's, and then you get asked about that in your interview and you can't follow it up. You know, it's something to be conscious of, I think. Yeah.
Definitely. And even things like deals, like sometimes people might mention a piece of work or a deal or a matter the firm's been involved in, but then freeze and be unable to talk about that if someone says, oh, so you mentioned this matter, what interests you about it? So very important point, I think. And I know I said this before, I know I sound like a broken record, but check and recheck your cover letter. You will not believe this, but every year we get letters addressed to the wrong firm. It could be addressed to the wrong person. It might say Baker McKenzie throughout, and then last paragraph might refer to Allen's or another firm. So every year we and other firms get those sort of letters. So, you know, attention to detail is so important as a legal practitioner, and, you know, good writing skills and everything. So really make sure you get that right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, I think that I know that when I was kind of looking at the firms that I wanted to apply for, I would go through and all of their websites will say like the kind of big pieces of information that, or like the big deals that they're working on, or the practice areas. So if there's something that interests you, like it should be something that interests you, not what you think is going to impress an interviewer, because people will see right through that. If you really care about renewable energy, or you really care about intellectual property, like whatever it may be, that's what you should focus on, because then you'll be able to kind of back that up and talk about why you're passionate. And I think we should go to our last question. That might be our last question. And that is, I guess they're kind of similar questions. So it's, do we need to know what practice group we're interested in when applying for clerkships? And if we do or don't know, like, should we put that kind of information in a cover letter?
In my view, you do not need to know. And you don't, I mean, some people have an idea. And if you have an idea, I think it's fine to mention it. I'd be careful and conscious about not pigeonholing yourself too early and just sort of saying I'm hell-bent on X area, because you don't know what you don't know. So maybe couching it in terms of, you know, an area of interest is intellectual property, as Tamar's in that group at the moment, but I'm very open to explore other areas, you know, something like that. But if you don't know, I think the important thing to get across if you're applying to a commercial law firm is that you are really interested in commercial law. You've enjoyed, you know, IP and corporations law and whatever subjects, to sort of show that interest, and you'd be interested in sort of learning more about, IP, corporate, M&A and employment or whatever. But you don't need to say that you are certain of which practice area you'd like to work in. That's not something that we sort of expect. We know you don't know what you don't know. But equally, if you do have a strong area and you've got, say you're interested in IP, you've got a science and, biotech background, that's something that could lend itself quite nicely to expressing an interest in a specific area. But you absolutely don't need to. So good question.
Yeah, also it'll change over time. Like when I first came and I did 2 rotations in my clerkship, one of the rotations that I had previously had a lot of experience in, and I kind of thought that that would be where I wanted to go. I ended up liking my other rotation better. And then as a paralegal throughout the year, I worked on lots of different types of matters from all different teams. And, I never would have ever seen myself in mergers and acquisitions. Like I just thought, oh, that's way too far removed from my interests. But I did some work in it and I realized what the substantive day-to-day of it is. And I was like, wow, that's actually really interesting. So it's kind of opened up more options. And I think that the more people you talk to, the more opinions you'll get. And that's always valuable.
And just taking the time to do those different practice, work in those different practice areas, I think is really valuable, as you sort of said, Tamar, like with having that exposure to different during a paralegal role to different areas. But even during our grad rotations, I've seen people rotate in a team they weren't necessarily interested in, but ended up loving it and settling there. So really important. This is advice I give my grads, to be open-minded and, just be willing to try out different areas and be open to trying new areas, even if it's an area you're not interested in. I've seen people go dramatically from wanting to be a corporate or M&A lawyer to ending up being a litigation lawyer. So, I think it's important to be open-minded.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the one thing that I've always been told is not to close off any opportunities and kind of to take on any work. And even if I'm not overly keen on it in the beginning, always good to just get that experience. And then if that reaffirms it and you still don't like it, that's fine. But now you know for sure.
Definitely.
But unless there are any other questions, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I suppose I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending today. Really great to have people so engaged and interested in private practice. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Thank you to Tamar for being a wonderful host and doing such a good job with facilitating the session, and to the team from Prospel and Grad Australia for hosting and enabling the session to happen. So that's it from me. Thank you.
No worries. And yeah, I guess if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to reach out. I don't know if my details have been made available, but my LinkedIn is just my name, Tamar Shafrani. But yeah, thank you to Natalie so much for your time and your valuable insights that you shared for our audience today. And I believe that clerkship applications are open at the moment?
Yes, Sydney applications have opened and will close sort of around early July, and Melbourne applications will open in early July. I'm not sure if the other timings of other states, sorry, but there are applications open at the moment. So,
okay, great.
Yep, great.
Yeah, so I guess feel free to check out all of those applications that are opening now through Grad Australia, and remember to go and set up your profile on Grad Australia to get notified of more sessions and more resources that are available. And I will be back next week to host a session on how to prepare for an interview at a top legal firm with Ryan Leckie of Norton Rose Fulbright. So I will see you guys next week, and thank you again for joining.
Thanks, everyone.